It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good Saturday afternoon. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a wonderful day outside, taking advantage of the opportunity we've got before the rain moves in next week. Thank you for taking time out to join me here on the Kim Hammer Show on 101.1 FM The Answer. As always, want to encourage you just to stay in tune with all the current events and some things that are happening not only around the state but around the nation by going up to the website, which is www.thekimhammershow.com. www.thekimhammershow.com. You can go up there and I post articles of interest both at the state level but also at the national level, and you can follow it on the website. Also, if you're interested in helping host this show, you can leave me a message on that. Somebody will get back to you as far as opportunities to advertise not only on the website but on the Kim Hammer Show as well. We're going to start off the show with something that's going on today down in Bryant that's kind of exciting. If you're looking for a family outing, this is the day to get out. You still have a little more time. I've got Jamie Bigelow on with the Bryant Rotary Club. Jamie, thank you for joining me here today on the Kim Hammer Show.
Thank you, Kim. We appreciate the opportunity to tell everybody what's going on today. It is so exciting. It's our 2021 Rubber Duck Derby Festival going on now. This morning we had more than 40 runners running our 5K. Amazing turnout there and good support. We'll have fun activities for the entire family. We've got bouncy houses, thank you, spacewalk, and we've got the Trippy Hippie Taco food truck, as well as the ice cream cart and Lee concessions out here. So if you're not a 5K runner, that's okay. You can run to the food trucks with me.
There you go.
We also will be racing our ducks. We have 1 hour left, and everybody asks why we race 5,000 rubber ducks down a man-made river every year. The reason we do it is for our kids' closet and the kids throughout Saline County by way of donations to Imagination Library, Bryant Boys and Girls Club, as well as our kids' closet. We were able to triple the size of our closet last year thanks to the support from our community. And if you would like an opportunity to win a cash prize, we've had some fabulous prizes. Our first place wins $2,000 cash. Second place wins $1,000 cash. Third place wins Baker's Fine Jewelry Diamond Pendant. Fourth place, 500 Visa gift cards. Fifth place, Chick-fil-A gift package. Sixth place is a 500 tool package. Seventh place is a smart home package. Eighth place is a 1-year car wash package. Ninth place is a 500 gas card. We've got a camping package, and from Top Shoes, a free pair of shoes presented by Arkansas Heart Hospital. We appreciate all of our sponsors, all of our donors. If you would like a chance to win, don't miss out. We're almost done. And you can go to BryantRotary.org and purchase your ducks online. You do not have to be present to win. We'll call you, but you don't want to miss it. Get out here to Mills Park, and we'll be racing at 1 o'clock.
Hey, on the give that website again,
BryantRotary.org.
So people that are listening and can't get there before you release the ducks at 2 o'clock, so if they go ahead and purchase, that is if you've got any ducks left for that matter, but if they go ahead and get those ducks purchased now, even though they can't get there physically, they could still be entered, and if they win one of those top 10 prizes, they'll still be able to claim it. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct.
That's a deal.
Be sure when you purchase your ducks online, put in your contact information, and be sure you put the phone number that you'd like us to call should you win.
Okay. Now, the duck race is that too, and it's a pretty neat thing because the Bryant Fire Department will back up the truck, and I know they've got the water chute all designed, and it goes down through the woods, and I forgot how many thousands of gallons they release, and, you can follow your ducks along the way. That is at Mills Park. Now, just in case people don't know where Mills Park is in Bryant, tell them the best way to go, because the duck derby, the race will be at 2, but how long do the activities go on after that?
Well, the duck race actually is at 1 o'clock.
Sorry, 1 o'clock. Okay.
We will regroup from our video of the ducks crossing, double, triple check, and we will announce our winners by 2. So you definitely want to get here to see these ducks. It's a sight to see if you have not seen it before. Again, you can go to BryantRotary.org. And we've got live music out here. The Ridge Walkers Band is performing. They are very family friendly, so all ages are welcome.
Very good. And they do support, I mean, all this supports three great entities there throughout Saline County. The Imagination Library, which is a great organization. The Clothes Closet, I know a lot of, a lot of students participate in that, and the way that, is organized, worked over there at the Lutheran Church. That's great. And do appreciate the Heart Hospital, new location there in Bryant. Appreciate them being one of the primary sponsors. And if you are hungry, I can tell you that the Hippy Tippy or Trippy Taco is worth the trip. It's a lot to say 3 times fast, but it's definitely worth the trip to get some of their food.
And just to reiterate, Senator, the festival is free. Want to bring the children out to jump in the bouncy houses? Will not cost you a dime. Come out, have a good time, hang out with us. We've only got an hour left.
Very good. And to find Mills Park, get off there at Reynolds Exit, go on down past the high school to the next stoplight, turn left, and follow that road around. You'll get right there to Mills Park. Plenty of parking, great place for a family environment. All right. Anything else you want to share with us, Jamie, about it?
I don't believe so. Thank you for all your support, and thank you for having us today.
You're more than welcome. Okay, again, remember that you can go up to BryantRotary.org, and you heard the list of the prizes that she mentioned a while ago. First place, I think, was $2,000, and so just remember that is a great opportunity for you to participate. Okay? All right, with that being said, we're going to unfortunately shift to a little bit more of a serious matter, and that is dealing with elections. A couple weeks ago, we were taking a look at some of the election bills that we ran during this last session. I've got a host of guests that are lined up that are going to be joining us. First of all, I've got Jennifer Lancaster on the line. Her husband, Clint, was on like 3 or 4 weeks ago. They were actually on the Trump team that worked up in Wisconsin. And then I've got Senator Mark Johnson, and I've got Representative Mark Lowery, all three on the line. So let's start with Jennifer. I appreciate each one of y'all joining us on the Kim Hammer Show today.
I'm happy to be here.
All right. I got the Mark and Mark show, right?
Yes, I'm on here.
Very good.
I'm here too.
All right. Hey, one thing I wanted to do was we got through some of the bills last time, but we didn't get through all of them. Just a disclaimer at first. And this was one of the criticisms or one of the things that they tried to attack the Georgia legislature for doing was running such a big bill. But let me ask Senator Johnson and Representative Lowery to kind of chime in on this. Part of the strategy of why we did what we did as far as the way that we ran the bills was because we wanted to make it very transparent so that people could see each one of the election issues that we were trying to address with the legislation on a small bite-size take, if you would. Would either one of y'all like to, or both y'all, weigh in as far as the idea, the strategy behind approaching dealing with the election issues the way that we did?
Well, Kim, I'll start, and first of all, thank you for having Representative Lowery and I on. As you know, and for the benefit of your listeners, we had a group of legislators and some other professionals, including former election officials, that understood what the problems we were dealing with were, helped us put some of that into proper context to be able to, as you say, put these in a transparent manner where we could, each bill stood alone. We did not pass every one that we tried, although we came close. But the thing was that the major ones, were passed. And the fact that we spread it around, I think, gave each citizen a chance to look at it in context. And you are absolutely right. By making it more transparent, we probably could have thrown it into an omnibus package and maybe got the whole thing. But I think it was better for the citizens, including those that came out in opposition to us, that they could look at each bill separately and express their opinions on it.
All right, Mark, you got anything to add on to that?
Well, I think what Senator Johnson said is exactly right. You also don't want, if there is opposition that tends to focus on one bill, you don't want that to bring down the whole package. And so I think it did allow us to kind of, for lack of a better phrase, maybe a divide and conquer kind of strategy. It allowed more legislators, different legislators from different parts of the state, to also participate in this. And we just appreciate your leadership, Senator Hammer, in pulling together a lot of this package.
So, Jennifer, here's why I wanted you on the show today. We're going to take a look at the rest of the legislation. We might even look back at a couple pieces from the last time we took this subject up. Tell the folks, in case they did not hear Clint, from about a month ago, just tell the listening audience about your experience and what was your role and what was what did you see with regards to working on the Trump campaign up in Wisconsin from your perspective?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we were called up and we were originally placed on the floor. We were a part of the legal team on the floor of the Wisconsin Recount Center. And we saw quite a bit there. We saw everything from, the setup was such that we had tabulators, of course, that observed and counted each ballot. And then on the opposite side of that table, there would be either Trump or Biden observers, oftentimes both. And then the legal team was usually just around. We were present on the floor in the event that there were any questions that came up or any objections that were to be made. So what I saw while I was there, I personally witnessed a tabulator after it had been announced that the counting was shutting down for the day and more than half of the observers had left. I saw a tabulator take a stack of ballots out, go to a far corner, and start counting the ballots without any observers around. I personally saw that. I personally saw pre-printed clerks' initials on ballots. I saw where the clerks had filled in or altered the ballots after they had been submitted. And there were many other things that I saw that certainly were concerning, but those are some of the main things that I saw that should never have happened.
Okay, so let's start going through the legislation. And what we're going to do is Jennifer, Senator Johnson, and Representative Lowery and I will talk a little bit about the legislation. And then what I'd like you to do, and I don't, and just for disclaimer, not that you would, but I just want the listening audience to know, we just want kind of like, the old TV show, just the facts, ma'am. I want to know, based on some of the legislation that we ran, if you see it as being relevant to what you witnessed or you experienced, because how long were you up there on the legal team?
I was up there for 2 weeks, and then I came back and I worked remotely. It was around Christmas time, and I have 2 young kids, so I assisted remotely. But so a total of about a month that I was involved. Okay,
and then Clint stayed up there pretty much the whole month, didn't he?
Yes, he was up there the whole month.
Okay.
And he is here.
Okay.
Next to
So Clint's there with you?
Yes, he is.
Oh, very good. Hey, Clint.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the Kim Hammer Show.
Thank you.
So what we would like you all to do is, as we talk through these pieces of legislation, weigh in as far as what you saw and what your observation was, and then as two individuals that, worked on that campaign, how you feel these pieces of legislation have value or do they have any relevancy at all. So let's start off with this one. We're going to take a look at, this is Senate Bill 582. This one is really addressing a local issue. This is the one that dealt with allowing the election commissioner to be sworn in by someone other than just the circuit clerk. If we had Christy on, she could talk about this one exclusively, but it deals with allowing someone else other than the county clerk to be able to swear in. Either one of the Marks want to weigh in on that one and just kind of share a little bit about why we did that?
Go ahead, Senator Johnson. I think you're more familiar with this than I am.
Well, I'll speak to it then. Kim. It is kind of a local thing, as you said, and I believe, Senator Hammer, that was your bill. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was. But it was probably one of the least controversial ones, simply because it makes clear that that's not the job of the county clerk to swear in these people. They need to be sworn in by, someone that, I hate to say, is above them, but a judge or someone that could normally affirm oaths. So that was the purpose of that. And there had been some issues of who was swearing in these officials that was brought up by Christy Starr, who's the chairman of the election commission in Pulaski County. And again, this was not one that we had a lot of controversy, but it was probably, you're starting sort of with the simple ones, and I know you're going to get more complex. So since I had the easy one, I will pass all the tough ones on to Representative Lowry.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what we.
And Senator, I'll also reference that within the bill, there also, I'm looking at some talking points on it. It eliminated the supervision of relatives, which is was a critical issue in Pulaski County. It prevents election judges from supervising their relatives in the same polling site. And so, again, this is just a real significant issue about transparency and integrity in the counting of ballots.
Why so?
Well, you just, I mean, even in a work situation, you always want to make sure that you don't have nepotism, that you don't have someone overseeing a relative. Now, there are some, I think it does allow that in smaller counties, if the county board of election commissioners approves it, and they're the ones that this decision should be made by, not a county judge, then that could be allowed. But again, it makes sure that there's a complete transparency in everyone knowing that this is actually going on.
Okay.
Also, right. If I recall, Mark, wasn't there a date, maybe 90 days before the election, that if they were going to have a situation where in a small county relatives would perhaps be working together, to give notice to all candidates in case anyone had an objection to it? I believe that was in that bill, wasn't it?
I believe so. In the incident that I referenced during the counting in Pulaski County, where where you maybe had a spoiled ballot and there was a necessity for duplication, there was a conflict in supervision. There was a specific situation where during an FOI issue, it was discovered that a husband supervised his wife during that process. And so, there may not have been anything untoward that happened, but it does at least present a potential for irregularities.
In the smaller counties, it does have some bearing just because of the difficulty of getting poll workers, but would that necessarily be an issue, you think, in the larger counties, or where would it have an adverse effect by having this written into the law?
Well,
I think you go ahead. Mark, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead, Senator.
Well, the only thing I was going to add is that in the small counties, you have there's a big distance between a lot of the precinct polling places, where in the larger counties it's a little more dense. And if someone wants to work outside the area where their spouse or other family member is located, then they can do so, and it would not be very far away. They could still serve, if they wanted to, as a volunteer election official. I say volunteer. They do get paid a small amount, but certainly not commensurate with the amount of work they do. And this way, if someone wanted to do that, they could still do it. It just not be under the direct supervision of a family member.
Okay. There's another component of the bill, and just for the listening audience, for the benefit of my guests too, we got about 5 minutes before we go to the break, and we're going to talk about a couple other components in this bill. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about absentee ballots. And so Jennifer and Clint, with regards to the experience you had up there dealing with absentee ballots, also we don't have mail-in. Well, we don't have the mail-out here. We prohibited that, but we're going to talk about the absentee ballots when we come back after the break. One of the other components that was in Senate Bill 582 was regarding the training of those that are actually going to be involved. And on page 2 of the bill, it says a person required to receive the training shall take and pass an examination of essential skills as determined by the State Board of Election Commissioners to receive compensation. One of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that those that are going to be in charge of the elections met a minimum standard of training so that when they're out there actually participating and overseeing the elections, is that there would be that at least minimum expectations that they could handle anything that would come up. Let me go to Clint and Jennifer and just ask you, in the month that you spent up there investigating, did you find situations where it wasn't maybe necessarily a situation of ill will or illegal attempt or illegal action as much as it was just lack of training on part of the individuals that were working it, or was there evidence of anything that was part of an overall larger plan?
I do believe that there may have been a lack of training. I think that could be a reasonable explanation for some of the things that I witnessed. For example, the pre-printed initials, while in violation of the law, I think that may have been done just out of convenience, especially in light of COVID. I think exceptions were made. So I think that's a possibility.
How do you, now y'all both attorneys, so how do you separate or how do you determine that somebody did something as a mistake or lack of knowledge versus actual intent to alter the election?
Well, you have to, for the intent, you have to have some sort of basis to infer intent or some sort of basis to infer malice. And, that's just the problem for me was it doesn't, whether it was just slipshod work or actual malice, we shouldn't be in the business in absentee balloting of trying to figure out which one that is. If it doesn't comply, it doesn't comply, and it doesn't get counted, regardless of your intentions. So it's really hard to tell, oops, sorry, I messed this one up again kind of thing. You can just avoid, I think it's best to avoid that altogether.
Tell you what, when we come back after the break, let me ask you about how many oops do you give somebody before you discern whether or not it is intentional or whether it is deliberate? Because that is, one thing we've also heard around here is that somebody just said, well, I made a mistake. That is part, just for the listeners, that is part of the intent of this piece of legislation, is that if we do raise the level of training and the level of expectation that if you're going to be compensated, then there would come with that a degree of responsibility for your actions, that you would be held to a higher standard because of what it's at stake. Let me ask you, as attorneys and those that work, Jennifer and Clint, is that a reasonable approach to how to address that issue, that if somebody has been trained to a level of certification, having passed, that it would make it less of an excuse on their part to claim ignorance?
Oh, well, anytime you have training and that's something that's covered, the ignorance part of it is taken out of the equation. Of course, it's long been the law in Arkansas that ignorance is no excuse. But without the ability to make the excuse, then it does add a layer of the malice of the intent that's in there, that you have to have the mens rea element of a crime. So, the training helps, but the hardest part is, getting prosecution out of it and things of that nature. So, but it does help, to answer your question.
Okay. All right. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a break here. We'll be back in just a little bit on the Kim Hammer Show. And guys, when we come back, we're going to talk about absentee ballots, and we're going to talk about what we did here in Arkansas, why we did it with regard to absentee ballots. And Jennifer and Clint, if you have anything to weigh in as far as what you saw in that area, we'll take that up. All right. So this is the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me here on 101.1 FM The Answer. My guests today are Clint and Jennifer Lancaster, who worked on the Trump legal team up in Wisconsin. And then I have Senator Mark Johnson and Representative Mark Lowery who were key legislators, along with several others, to help get some legislation through to help improve, to make sure that our election process here in the state of Arkansas has risen to the highest level of integrity possible. We'll be right back after the break on the Kim Hammer Show. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me here on a beautiful Saturday. My guests today are Clint and Jennifer Lancaster, worked on the Trump legal team up in Wisconsin. Clint was up there for the whole month. Jennifer was up there for a couple weeks, but then she came back and worked remotely to be a good mom, taking care of her kids, and appreciate that. And then I have Senator Mark Johnson, Representative Mark Lowery on the Kim Hammer Show today. We're talking about the legislation that we passed regarding election laws. All right, let's shift our attention to absentee ballots, and Senate Bill 643, which was one that I ran and Representative Ladyman ran. And this actually shifted when absentee ballots could be turned in, and we moved it to where they had to be turned in by the Friday before the election. Mark, I want you to weigh in on this because you guys were involved in the passage of this legislation as well. But one of the intents behind the bill was that we would be able to give the clerks time and also to make sure that the absentee ballots were secured between the time that the deadline was for getting them turned in until election day, with regards to knowing where they are and being able to count them. One thing also that was intended behind this was we do not have, at least at this time, although there is going to be an interim study introduced in the next week that is going to bring up the issue of real-time voting. One of the challenges is that you could actually have gone in on Monday and voted absentee ballot, and because some counties could not get real-time voting loaded up to see who voted, you could go in on Tuesday and actually vote and be able to vote twice. Mark, y'all got anything to weigh in on this at this point?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
All right, let's go to Mark. Let's go Mark Lowery.
Yeah, I think this ties in really closely with the other bill that I've sponsored over in the House, 1715, and we talked about it on your last show, clarifying about absentee ballots and all of the issues that came up of the county clerk in Pulaski County not comparing absentee ballot application signatures to the voter registration signature. I think the count was something like over 9,200 absentee applications. They said the vast majority of those, they did not have voter registration records on file to compare signatures, and they just went ahead and sent them out anyway. So I think that those two bills work together to make sure that the absentee ballot, especially when you see such a spike in absentee ballots like we did in 2020, and I think we all agree that that is probably going to be the norm moving forward, that you're going to have more issues with absentee ballots. But I think we've cleaned up the process quite a bit with these pieces of legislation.
Mark Johnson, anything?
Well, one thing that I absolutely believe is that this is where the potential for shenanigans related to the election, absentee ballots are the place we do it. We try to limit who can handle an absentee ballot, how many can be carried by an individual to turn them in. And we had some concerning things happen, at least in Pulaski County, where the absentee ballots were handled in a manner where individuals could see what actually take the inner envelope out and hold it up to the light and do some things that were quite disturbing. And I know we're going to be hearing more about this in this upcoming JPR hearing. But the fact of the matter is that if you are trying to do a sleight of hand thing, and you alluded to it as well, Mark, is that someone could be voting absentee, and then because of the late date to get that information in and recorded in the poll books that person did vote absentee, then there's a possibility that they could vote a second time on Tuesday because that had not been documented or registered that they had already voted. So it was at least a concern of how some of those who might be prone to pull the shenanigans would do it, and that is probably something we need to take a careful look at even in the future with other further legislation. But this was a fact that you have to cut this off to allow the local election officials to do their job in a timely manner prior to Election Day on Tuesday.
All right, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Jennifer and Clint, and while they are answering the question, I want to ask them what I'd like Mark to be ready to come back and share is tell people about the absentee balloting process, because you talk about outer envelope under the executive orders this time, because we were under COVID, they were allowed to open them earlier because there was such a groundswell or anticipated groundswell of absentee ballots. And I think there was like 115,000 absentee ballots cast this last election cycle, which we don't know if that trend is going to stay up or go down, with COVID getting under control and how it's going to be affected in 2022. So what I want you all to do when we come back is talk people through the process from when they can get their absentee ballot right up to the time that their vote is counted as an absentee ballot. But let me ask Jennifer and Clint, when y'all were up there working on the Trump campaign, what was your experience in dealing with the absentee ballots, and what was the process that they used up there?
So they did not have early voting like we do here. What they did have was the absentee. One of the areas where we saw the most abuse was with the indefinitely confined. So what the process was supposed to be is such that the elector would fill out specific documentation, provide their ID, etc. Well, what we saw happen was the clerks were actually encouraging electors to say that they were indefinitely confined. They said no ID was necessary, and that in the future they would just mail out their ballot. And so there were people who were not, in fact, indefinitely confined, who were encouraged to vote that way. And so we identified more than 17,000 ballots that fell under the indefinitely confined, as well as some early voting where it took place. It was not passed appropriately. So the early voting absentee voting had to take place after being approved in very specific locations, and those laws were not followed. The voting locations were not approved appropriately, so we saw a lot of abuse in those different areas.
All right, Mark or Clint, did you have anything to chime in on?
I don't know how I could follow that and add anything that would be worthwhile.
Spoken like a good husband. All right. So, Mark, y'all just share the responsibility here. Tell people about the absentee ballot process as far as when it begins. I'll get it started, that people can actually request their absentee ballot at any time during the year by notifying the clerk. And that could be way before the election is even scheduled. Like in the fall, they could request it in the spring. Let me just get it started, and then y'all take it from there and bounce it back and forth and get us up through when the vote is actually, the absentee ballot is actually counted by the clerk or whoever's running the election.
Mark, you take that one.
Well, thank you. Kicking the tough one to me, because I'll be honest with you. I know we have an outer envelope, we have an inner envelope. The outer envelope would contain within it some materials to identify the voter and voter statement that has to be included in that. But just because you're opening the outer envelope does not mean you have access to the ballot itself. The ballot is in the inner envelope. And one of the issues that we addressed in the bill that I referenced previously about absentee ballots is that after the outer envelope of the absentee ballots open, the county clerk and the deputies of the county clerk cannot have access to the absentee ballots or the absentee ballot paperwork unless the election commissioners granted that access, because the ultimate authority for counting those ballots is with the county, the election commissioners, and those that they have designated to be canvassers. That inner envelope cannot be opened any earlier than 8:30 on the day of the election. And so those are some of the really specific guidelines as far as making sure that there's not these shenanigans or funny business that's been previously referenced.
And you did address that in your bill, because I was just reading the County Board of Election Commissioners may grant a county clerk or deputies of the county clerk access to the absentee ballot materials in the subdivision of this section if the access is granted by an affirmative vote of the County Board of Election Commissioners for specific purpose and for designated election. Is that the part of the bill you ran that you're talking about?
That's exactly right. And if for some reason the requested materials, this is also in the law before we even changed it. The required materials are not properly placed in the outer envelope. That doesn't give an excuse to say, well, we'll look for them in the inner envelope. You have to wait until no earlier than 8:30 on election day, and it would be a second election official that would open that up. So you make sure, again, that you have a proper chain of custody, that you don't have the same person opening up both of those envelopes.
With regards to curing the ballot, you hear that term tossed around as far as curing the ballot. Either one of you all want to weigh in on that?
Go ahead, Senator.
That comes back, Senator Hammer, to the issue that Representative Lowery is kind of the guru on, which is voter ID. And, we now require an actual copy of an ID or another, your driver's license, of course, is the obvious one most people have, but there can be others. And there's even a provision in the law where clerks can create and provide an ID that's acceptable for someone that doesn't have one. I don't know how they function in the world of 2021 without one at all, but theoretically they could, and the legislation and the constitutional amendment that covers that spells that out. Now, the ballot itself, again, this cure thing goes back to the fact that you could vote provisionally if you don't have the ID, but you have to come back and provide that after the fact. And that's I'll let Representative Lowery talk about the signature process and how he worked to get that, in my opinion, totally fixed this session, even though there had been it seemed to be the one loophole that everyone was taking advantage of over the last couple of years. So, Mark, would you kind of get into that a little bit?
Well, we had allowed with the previous voter ID bill that if you did not have a voter ID, and this is whether you are voting on the day of the election, early voting, or even submitting your absentee ballot, you could cast a provisional ballot, and that could be cured by a sworn statement, signing your name. One of the things we've discovered, especially through the absentee ballot process, was that there really is no uniform standard for comparing signatures. The only uniform standard that we really can have as far as identification is the voter ID itself. And so we removed that sworn statement provision that was in the original law, and now moving forward, voter ID will be exactly that you have to have that voter ID. Now, the cure process would be if they open, say, the absentee ballot, they open the outer envelope and they find that the person had not submitted a copy of their voter ID, a photocopy of their voter ID as one of the provided materials, then that could be cured. You don't just throw that ballot out. The voter could be contacted to let them know that we will allow you to cure this, to send us a copy or bring us a copy of your your ID, so that your ballot can be counted. But it does not give the right, again, to a county clerk to then go, before 8:30 on the election day to open up that inner envelope. And, some people may be listening to this and going, okay, so what are we talking about? How many votes can be affected? As someone who, my first election that I won in 2012 was a primary, and I won it by 9 votes. It doesn't take a whole lot of hanky-panky to turn the results of an election. And we need for people to have complete confidence that there is integrity in the process, and that's what we've attempted to do with all of this legislation.
And that's a key point because, and let me ask Clint and Jennifer to weigh in on this. We had a conversation this week. You two were involved in it, and one of the challenges that is out there that we need to work on between 2022 is that people are saying, "Well, why go vote? It doesn't count." Now, here in Arkansas, I think we've got a pretty good success rate, but at the same time, there was room for improvement. And that was the intent of all these pieces of legislation so that we don't begin down a slippery slope, so we don't have a Clint and Jennifer Lancaster having to come into Arkansas from out of state in order to determine if something inappropriate was going on in the election process. Jennifer and Clint, you heard them talking about signatures and ID verification, which is a real point of resistance among one party, not the Republican Party. What was the experience up there that you had as far as voter ID and the struggles of how that may have had bearing in the election results up there?
So as Jennifer was talking about the indefinitely confined voters, they didn't have to provide an ID at all, and they got their ballot the next time just automatically. When it came down to, so Wisconsin has we don't compare signatures, or we don't do signature matching, and you would often hear the board, the commission up there say things like the county commission that was over the Dane County recount say, well, we're not handwriting experts, so we're not going to go by the fact that this signature looks nothing like it did in previous years. I think that voter ID for the absentee ballots that Jennifer and I saw, it was the problem was at the clerk level. They would be missing a clerk's initial on the envelope or a signature on the ballot about the ID being sent out and verified about the ID on file or being viewed before it was sent out. That would be missing, or it would be missing when it came back in. And rather than not count the ballots, they elected to count those ballots. Even though the Wisconsin law said they weren't supposed to be counted, they counted them anyway, saying that was a clerk's error. And they fell back on this law that said that a clerk's error shouldn't deprive a voter, shouldn't disenfranchise a voter. And so that's kind of where we saw it. And I don't know what the Wisconsin legislature has to do to make it more clear, because they said these ballots will not be counted. But that's our experience in Wisconsin with signatures and voter ID.
So let me ask you, what was when you were out and about up in Wisconsin, what was the tone of the people as far as feeling that their votes had been disenfranchised, or what was the tone of the people up there as far as feeling like, what good does it do to go vote?
So of course, we were in Dane County, which is Madison, and to say it's a liberal place would be, it's pretty liberal. It's like a little spot of California up there. And so they were all kind of like, ha, 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 Trump lost. You'll never prove this. And so that was the Dane and Milwaukee, which are the two most liberal counties. And you see things like people stamping out jail Trump and painting it red in the snow and stuff like that. The big issue and the argument that I really wanted to push was, look, you're going to have to disenfranchise some voters here. You might as well disenfranchise the 2 counties that cheated rather than the rest of the state that voted for Trump. But that's just not how the court came down. The liberals up there kept saying there was no fraud. You're just sore losers. And the conservatives were pointing to all the ballots. Like I think I told you on the show, we had, I think it was 190,000, 190, hang on a second, 190 with 3 zeros behind it, put it that way. And so, those were ballots that we should have had drawn down, but the liberals were just saying, no, well, you just lost. And we're pointing to all these ballots.
It's an old-fashioned stuff the ballot box thing then. Is that right, Clint? Just modern version.
I wouldn't say, so yeah, maybe it was more like the stuff, if they were just, I don't know about stuff in the ballot box, but they were just like, hey, you're not really qualified to vote, or you can't really prove that you're qualified to vote, but it's okay. We'll just take it anyway. So they weren't like putting fake ballots in, but they were just putting ballots in that shouldn't have otherwise qualified. I mean, these are people that may or may not have existed, but if you can't follow simple instructions about putting your initials on a ballot, you need to come vote in person.
Well, and we're in a situation now that, every time someone votes illegally or twice or whatever, then that disenfranchises the honest voter. It's almost a one-for-one thing.
So
somebody's got to get disenfranchised. There's, I think people should disenfranchise the cheaters and not the people who didn't. But I get your point exactly.
All right, let me ask y'all, with the time I got left, and we didn't get to all the bills. One day, Mark, Johnson, I'm going to get you back on because I want you to talk about your Senate bill. What was it, 556?
The one that didn't make it.
Yeah, what was it? It's 556, and we'll talk about
556.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Senate Bill 644 because those 2 bills kind of give us some direction into the future about how we can how we can recommend to the State Board of Elections to take over a county that has proven reputation of not handling their elections properly. There's a couple points I want to hit on before we wrap it up today on the Kim Hammer Show. I mentioned that term curing the ballot a while ago, and Mark, y'all straighten me out, but the curing the ballot is whenever they open that outer envelope and they see that somebody has left maybe off a valuable piece of information that would determine whether or not the vote or the ballot that's inside the sealed envelope is actually going to count. Now, the question is, who determines who gets to contact who in order to cure that ballot? And I think that's one of the loopholes we tried to close, is some accountability to make sure that if there's a absentee ballot that has missing information, that all voters, regardless of which party affiliation they were with, that all voters would be able to be contacted in order to make sure that what was missing or needed to be verified would be done so in a timely manner so that their vote would count. Mark, am I accurate on that, or did I misstate anything, or anything y'all want to add to that?
No, Tim, I think that's exactly right, because if you have, for instance, in a tied election, and you have a county clerk who is a Democrat and her staff are Democrats, and they open up the outer envelope, there's too much potential for them to only contact voters that they know are in Democrat-leaning counties, or precincts, for them to cure their ballot. So you have to make sure that there is a process where everyone is contacted. Now, whether we know that those things happened or not, it doesn't matter. We just have to be above reproach in making sure all voters are able to have the same treatment in being able to make sure that their vote counts.
And I guess that would be my point I'd want to drive home. If these pieces of legislation, and from experiences that have been learned in other parts of the country, like Jennifer and Clint have seen firsthand, why would you not, for the sake of all voters, whether Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Independent, Why would you not want to make sure that every one of those votes is handled properly so that everybody's vote is able to be counted legitimately? And for there to be pushback against that causes me to wonder, what is it you're trying to hide, or what is it that you're trying to insert into the election process that these bills will stop you from being able to do? Clint, Jennifer, your response?
I mean, I think that you're right. I think that actually it's funny because you mentioned that my Apple News feed says click here to see which states Republicans have made it more hard to vote in. And so I think that I'm with you. You know, why is it hard to follow the rules? It shouldn't be. And I think that shoring up these election laws and making these rules more solid benefits us all, because then, unlike the senator said, you don't have to disenfranchise anybody. The only person, everybody got a chance to vote. Everybody believes in the outcome and the integrity of the election, and life goes on like it should without us having to wonder about who cheated and how they did it.
All right. Mark Johnson, you got 30 seconds. Convince people why they should get out and vote in 2022. Then Mark Lowery, you get the next 30 seconds. Go.
You know, it's a real disconcerting thing when people lose confidence in the process, Kim, and they really think their vote doesn't count. That's, as Mark mentioned, he won by 9 votes the first time he ran in a primary. Every vote does count. And if there are those out there that are, to use the word cheating, then everybody on the right side needs to make sure they show up to hopefully counteract that.
All right.
Now, we want only legitimate votes.
Very good. Mark Lowery, got to cut you off, buddy. Sorry, I just got the flag.
That's right.
There, we're at 30 seconds. All right, you've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show. Clint and Jennifer Lancaster, thank you so much for being on. Senator Mark Johnson and Representative Mark Lowery, thank you for being on. I hope you feel better knowing that we've tried to insert into the process integrity in the election. Get ready to go out and vote in 2022. Thank you for the Kim Hammer Show listening.